This class is obviously called Seated in the Heavenlies. This is the second class in part 5, which is just the ways that the class is split up throughout the quarter. There's 5 different parts, and this is the second. Again, like was already mentioned, this is technically the last class in the section of classes we have. This is not the last, but this is how we'll close it. So just to kind of get us thinking a little bit. I have a question. This does have something to do with our class, I promise. Why are we attracted to music? At a very base level, what is it that attracts us to music, perhaps? This is going somewhere, I promise. That's it. We'll move on. Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. Why else? I mean, why, or maybe not we, maybe why do you like music? Why do you like the music that you like? What attracts you to the music you enjoy?
It's kind of a way we can express ourselves.
Self-expression. Okay. Cool. Yeah, Lauren.
Relieve ourselves from the stress that's happening. More like a therapy type of thing. That when you're in a stressful situation,
Mm-hmm.
when you're calming yourself down,
Yeah.
music can help.
Yeah, be therapeutic. Yeah.
It's really subjective, but I think everybody gravitates to some kind of appreciation of beauty.
Right. Yeah, Kendall. Cool. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's fun stuff. Yeah, one of the things the book was talking about, what I really enjoyed is all those, yes, are true, but also another reason that we typically, people in general, appreciate music, find beauty in music, is there's a sense of a bunch of different things coming together in like a unified way. You could say the same kind of, about painting. Different colors. Sometimes, if you look at a color wheel, there's the colors that, oh my gosh, now I forgot everything. The complementary colors, that's what it is. Like, I now thought of it, blue and orange, red and green. Colors that go together in a nice way. And it may not seem that way, but once you put them together in a painting, they look nice. You could say the same thing about cooking, right? A bunch of things that on their own have entirely different tastes, different textures, whatever. But when you put them together and do certain things, you have something that comes together in a unified way. Specifically about music, I am mindful of when Chris and we went on our honeymoon. We got to spend that time we went to our honeymoon in the UK, and we were in some English town, and they were doing an evensong performance, which at the local church was just a gathering of people who, if you guys know what an evensong is, they just spend some time singing hymns. It's something they do twice a week. I don't remember what the schedule was, but we were able to witness that. And this, I don't know what I was expecting. It was a fairly local thing. I was expecting maybe a kids choir or some sort or something, but what I was not expecting is like 50 trained like choral singers coming together in a huge cathedral, and it sounded like something from Lord of the Rings. It was the coolest thing I think I've ever witnessed in my entire life. And it was so awesome to hear all these different voices come together as one. There's a couple times where I just like had my eyes closed, just like in this sort of, and I'm pretty sure Krista thought it was funny. But it was just really cool to see, to hear all these different voices coming together. And so something that the book talks about, something that we're thinking about is there's congruity. What is congruity, just in general? You math people, which I am not one of you, probably heard this word quite a bit. Congruent. What is something? What if something is congruent? Yeah. Yeah, same. Congruity can also mean harmony. Okay, it can also mean things are working together. Okay, so when it comes to music, when it comes to painting, I guess, cooking even, all those things, it's satisfying. We like it because there's some sort of harmony. Things work, okay? But what about when things are incongruent or dissonant, okay? Maybe there's a flat singer. Maybe you added too much salt in a recipe. Maybe you added too much blue to a, I don't know. When things become imbalanced, when things become incongruent, dissonant, discordant, whatever word you want to use, uneven, that is not satisfying. We do not like that. I think last time I taught the class, for one of the fonts that this specific PowerPoint uses, there's 2 quotation marks. One was really curved and one was square, and it drove me nuts. I had to point it out so that all of you could feel the pain that I was feeling. But yeah, when things are incongruent and dissonant, it's really unsatisfying to us. So I want to dive right into the lesson today. This book, or this chapter specifically was not super linear, I guess. It kind of bounced around all over the place, and it was somewhat of a struggle to turn it into a class, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. So hopefully that comes across. But the book talks about this idea of a heaven self and an earth self, okay? So talking about this dissonance, talking about sometimes incongruity, this is something that unfortunately sometimes as Christians we're familiar with. If you don't know what I'm talking about, stick with me. So let's turn over really quick to Romans 7. And this is a passage we're all very familiar with. But this is a prime example of this incongruent feeling, this dissonant feeling that we experience all the time. How do I want to read all of that? Yeah, let's go ahead and read all that's there. Let's read verses 14 to 24. If I can have somebody read that for me, that would be excellent.
For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am fleshly, sold into bondage to sin. For I do not understand what I am doing, for I am not practicing what I want to do, but I do the very thing I hate. However, if I do the very thing that I do not want to do, I agree with the law, that the law is bitter. But now, no longer am I the one doing it, but sin that dwells in me. For I know that good does not dwell in me, that is, in my flesh, for the willing is present in me, but the doing of the good is not. For the good that I want, I do not do, but I practice the very evil that I do not want. But if I do the very thing that I do not want, I am no longer the one doing it, but sin that dwells in me. I find then in principle that evil is present in me, the one who wants to do good. For I joyfully agree with the law of God in a person, but I see a different law in the parts of my body, waging war against the law of my mind, and making me a prisoner of the law of sin, the law which is in my body's parts. Wretched man that I am, who will set me free from the body of sin and death.
You can stop right there. Thank you very much. Man, again, this is just an absolute prime example of someone who's dealing with lots of this incongruity, just a feeling of dissonance. Things are not in harmony. Again, we're all super familiar with this passage for the most part, but this is one of my favorite passages when it comes to someone being very open about their struggles with sin, or with their struggles just maybe not even necessarily with some sort of awful sin, but just this other, very fleshly part of somebody. So that's what this book was talking about a little bit. Heaven self versus earth self. Sometimes we do think of in terms of an earth and heaven self. That makes no sense. We'll talk about it. And it's tempting to give into an earth self. Okay. I really like this quote, and so I had to steal it right from the book. If I can't be what I really want, then maybe I can convince myself to want what I apparently am. And it can be super easy to fall into this trap. Okay? So this typically comes from moments of weakness, of struggle, of shortcoming, laziness. It doesn't have to necessarily born giving into an earth self. Doesn't necessarily have to be born from a life of really intense sin. Sometimes it comes from laziness, from lethargy, from feeling very not like talks about in Revelation, not warm nor cold, but very lukewarm. Okay, we think we're getting rid sometimes of any sort of distance when we kind of take the easy way out and say, you know what, I'm just going to I'm going to make my faith easier. Okay, and I really like that quote. If I can't be what I really want, then maybe I can convince myself to want what I guess I apparently am. Okay, any questions before I move on? I'll explain things a little bit more as we go on. This is just kind of the setup here, but any questions? Okay. Let me move on. Just keep talking about this. So heaven self versus earth self continued. So like I was just saying, this doesn't necessarily equate giving into this earth self doesn't necessarily equate to a life of sin, but often shallow faith. Some characteristics that go along with that. I then want, if I'm giving into my earth self, I then want only comfortable faith experiences, not to be pushed outside of my limits, because that's uncomfortable. I become approval motivated and self-centered. I'm removing specks from others' eyes and ignoring the log in my own. This book really describes something that was pretty powerful. It describes this idea of someone who goes through, a midlife crisis. And at their midlife crisis, they realizing my whole life, my faith has been very shallow. My faith has been very weak. My faith has not challenged me, has not pushed me outside of my boundaries. And because of that, I've been living a very shallow faith lifestyle. And this book talks about what an experience like that might be for somebody. It's pretty intense, pretty powerful. So we might think that once we give in and not because and the reason I should have said this a minute ago, a lot of time this comes from us viewing a more serious, boundary pushing, intense faith. Sometimes it's too hard, and so we settle and we say, look, I'll take comfortable, easy route. I'll go to church. I'll check those boxes. I'll show up for a thing here and there. Maybe I'll be a counselor at camp, every other year or whatever. I'll check off boxes, whatever. But I don't know. Is that really challenging you? Is that motivating you to be the best that you can be? I don't know. I can't speak for you. But this is kind of what this book is talking about. We think it's getting rid sometimes, like what Paul is describing here, this, I want to do this, I want to do this. We think sometimes that going, you know what, I'll just be comfortable in my faith. Sometimes we think that's pushing the dissonance away, that some incongruent feeling that we sometimes feel. I can't be good enough. Well, maybe I'll just take the easy way out. It'll feel easier, and then that'll get rid of this incongruent feeling that I'm feeling, this dissonance. But is it really getting rid of that? Okay, Matthew 6:22. I'm just going to read that really quick. I'm not going to make you all turn there. Matthew chapter 6, verse 22 says this. In context of what we're talking about, says, and again, I'm reading from the New Living Translation. It says, your eye is like a lamp that provides light for your body. When your eye is healthy, your whole body is filled with light. What other translations say in place of healthy there? Some say like clear or clear. This is what I want, right? This is what I want from my faith. I want clear vision. I want clarity. I want to be focused. I want to not be distracted by the earth self that sometimes threatens to take over. Again, an earth self that is not necessarily equating to a life of outrageous sin, but sometimes just straight up, sometimes laziness. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
You may be going here, and if you are, stop me. But to me, what this is the challenge or the conflict or the whatever, the balance between contentment and complacency.
Yeah.
There's a point where if you're really trying your best, but you mess up or you can't quite get it, then you have to decide, I can be content with this. I'm giving it my all, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Complacency, you look at what Paul said in Romans 7. If Paul says, what I want to do is too hard, so I'm not going to try. That's complacency.
Yeah.
And it's the pushing is fighting against complacency.
Right.
But at some point, we do have to get to a point where we can say, okay,
Well,
I'm content with my growth.
yeah, and maybe I haven't done a good job of saying this, but like, kind of the mindset that Paul has in Romans chapter 7, that's like ideal. Because Paul's taking his faith very seriously. And he's very, I mean, you can see the anguish that's coming through in his writing. He's so bothered by the struggles that he goes through. And he's just like, I'm so sick and tired of this. I want to do these things, but I keep doing this. Stuff I want to do, I'm not doing, and I keep doing this. And he's so frustrated. And that's, in terms of just somebody's true struggles with faith, that's ideal because it's real, and it's a true showing of somebody who's taking their faith seriously. And so, again, I don't think I said this very clearly. This idea of letting your earth self take over, again, it's not necessarily a life of sin. Sometimes it is that complacency. It's going, you know what? That mindset that Paul has in Romans chapter 7, that sounds like too stressful for me. It sounds like that takes too much of my energy. I'm going to go for a more easy, comfortable faith lifestyle. Again, I'll show up to church, for the most part. I'll do the things. I'll have this surface level faith that others might see. Again, talking about this approval-motivated, self-centered faith. Others can see that I look like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but in reality, deep down, man, somewhere I know I'm not giving it my all. I want the comfortable faith experiences, not the things that are going to really test my boundaries, really test my endurance as a Christian. I'm going to really take it nice and slow. The whole time I'm removing specks from other eyes, but ignoring the massive redwood tree sticking out of my eye, okay? So that's those comfortable, or that's this idea of your earth self, your more fleshly self. Again, not necessarily sin, though it can be sin, but just a more comfortable, shallow faith. Again, going back to Matthew chapter 6, a healthy eye, a clear eye, an eye focused on what I'm supposed to be focused on. Single vision, not double vision. How do I get there? Okay, how do we do that? And that's what we're going to be talking about. So getting rid of dissonance, okay? Getting rid of dissonance. So first, we need to see the truth. We need to lose to gain. We need to lose to gain. God helps us see that we have to lose ourselves to find our truths. And I do apologize. I feel like sometimes I write the ideas I have out in full sentences and not a nice little bullet points that I can expand on. I always just write like my direct speech, which I apologize for. God helps us see that we have to lose ourselves to find our true selves, the heaven selves that Christ creates. Okay? Because sometimes a lot of this does come from perception, okay, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes as well. I really like this quote. I'm not a body with a spirit, but a spirit with a body. Again, that's just flip-flopping these two words, but it creates a whole new meaning. Sometimes I think we go around, walking around, I'm just a body. I'm a person with a spirit inside me. I would challenge you, and I need to challenge myself, to not think that way. Think of it the opposite. I'm a spirit that just happens to have a body walking around. Does that make sense? Flip-flop that thinking, and your perception about who you are will change drastically. Instead of an earthly self trying to attain a heavenly self, it's the heavenly self taking the earthly self captive. Does that make sense? It's instead of, and this is where it's hard to explain. It's instead of taking the mindset that you're just an earthly self, always trying to reach that heavenly, always trying to reach a standard, flip-flop it. You are a heavenly self that needs to take that earthly self, that lazy self, that sinful self being captive, getting rid of it. Every day should be filled with denial, renewal. The book talks about daily taking up your cross, daily crucifixion, daily getting rid of all this stuff and renewing every single day. We will then see that God's commands and desires that we see in Scripture are simplifiers, okay? They're simplifiers and tools to make our lives more congruent, more balanced, more focused, more single, okay? Questions about this? I know it was kind of talking at you a lot, so I'm sorry about that. But any questions, any comments to go with what we're talking about?
Like in my life, what I have learned is I have spent a big chunk of my Christian life
Yes.
one foot in
Yes.
the church.
Yes.
And it does boil down to, I think the prior slide had it on there. Um, there's a level of um, centeredness,
Yes.
self-seeking attitude. I want to have my cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I'm going to try to live within the church, and do all the things, be a part of everything, serve, and that's
Right.
going to keep me focused enough to be spiritual.
Right.
There's some level of spirituality I can achieve the more I serve.
Right.
Versus looking at how I've missed opportunities in my life to completely, actually give up my will.
Right.
And do God's will.
Right.
And so that's, and I like this section that you started with Paul, because I relate to that 100%.
Right.
I know exactly what Paul's
Yeah.
talking about.
Oh yeah.
And he's having like an epiphany.
Yeah.
And this is something we all have to come to experience if we're going to put on our big boy pants and actually be a Christian.
Right.
And actually cut away this stuff that way we used to live and be all in for God. We just can't hold on to anything of ourselves anymore.
Right. And going off of what you're saying, that's what this chapter is talking about. Is look, once you understand what God wants from you, following His path is a simplifier in life, because it puts you on a path that's laid out. It's clearly laid out. It makes your lives more congruent. It takes away the incongruency, because again, kind of what you're talking about, having 1 foot in the world, one foot in faith, or in your faith life, in your Christian walk, whatever you want to call it. That's going to create that dissonance. That's going to create that imbalance that we feel. And again, that's what I was talking about earlier. We see the struggle that, for example, Paul has in Romans chapter 7, and I mean, again, he's being upfront about his struggles, but it's a very, very intense faith. He's taking his faith very seriously, putting a lot of energy, a lot of stress, a lot of emotion into his wrestle with faith. And sometimes some of us might see that and go, "Ooh, that sounds tough. I don't want to deal with that. We don't maybe say this like out loud, but in some way we kind of go through the thought process. I'm gonna just take kind of the easy road here. I'm gonna approach my faith very comfortably, minimal struggle, minimal stress. I'm gonna just kind of do this the easy way, right? Again, we might not say that, but yeah, exactly what you're talking about. Many of us deal with this. I would venture to say all of us deal with this in some way or another at some point. Okay. Any other? Yeah.
So is the thesis you and the author are trying to make that as Christians we can get rid of dissonance here on earth, or that we have to be comfortable with dissonance here on earth and ultimately that gets resolved when we get to heaven?
Getting rid of it on earth by doing what we're supposed to do by, and I'll explain this here in a few minutes a little bit more. But yeah, it's on earth. Yeah. In fact, let me just move on now so that we can. And I like this. The author lays out this idea of a prescription, a daily prescription to be taken daily. How do we practically do this? Okay, how do we practically get rid of the dissonance? How do we practically get rid of this idea of dissonance? I'm going to turn over to James chapter 4. If somebody wants to tackle verses 7 and 8, not too long of a read there.
Therefore submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded.
Okay, pretty simple. This is a nice prescription formula. How to get rid of dissonance, how to get rid of double sight, double-mindedness. So the first one is resist the devil, and he'll flee from you. Okay, that's what we talked about. That may happen much sooner or much later than you think it will happen, but it's going to happen. Okay, that's what Scripture says right there. It doesn't say that he'll flee from you tomorrow. It doesn't say that he'll flee from you immediately. That may take some time. It may take some time for that to be noticed, but he will flee from you. Approach God, draw near to God, and he'll approach you. And I like this. The approach and its effectiveness are guaranteed, though levels of perception may fluctuate. You might not recognize it as much as you immediately. Note, use the resist, flee, and approach combination for maximum effectiveness. While you are drawing near to God, also resist the devil at the same time. Okay, use both these first two steps at the same time for the maximum effectiveness. And then I like this last one here. Technically it's 3 and 4, but I'm combining them in one. Wash your hands and purify your hearts. Another very powerful combination, as the cleansing is both inward and outward. Okay, yeah.
The difficulty we might have with that is James is painting with very broad strokes.
Yeah.
And it's great principles, just how do we apply them? It's up to us to look at every single aspect of what we're doing in our lives and see if we're following ahead.
Right, and that is something that, for example, if I go and teach the teen class or something, that's something I always like to ask them. How do you do this practically? Something that gets brought up a lot is giving things to God or doing this, or very, I don't want to say nebulous statements, not because that's not what it is, but statements that are sometimes, buzzwords. We say this, give that to God. Okay, well, how do you do that? And then just look at me. I don't know. Well, then how do we do that? So, resist the devil. How do we do that? How do we resist the devil? I'll ask y'all. How do we resist the devil? Seems like we can't, shake hands with the devil and see him. So how do we resist him?
Starts with awareness. Be
Yeah.
aware that he's out there trying to do what Peter said.
Yeah, be aware of your own temptations. Okay, be aware of your own temptations. If you know that if you succumb to anger really easily, prepare. Make preparations when you're on the road. If you're someone like me and get really easily irritated on the road, find ways to navigate that. Find ways to create more peace for you while you're driving. If you, again, be mindful of your own temptations. Yeah.
A lot of time we look at that and instead of resist the devil, we think it's a confrontational thing where we've got to get in.
Right.
I've got to put myself in those situations and train myself to retreat is a perfectly good strategy. When you flee from the devil, it might be that he is also fleeing from you because he sees, okay, I'm not going to have any purchase there.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on to more fertile ground.
Right. You don't have to go and meet him head on. Sometimes you can just avoid. Sometimes resisting is avoidance, especially when it comes to temptation. So just if you know that there's a place, for example, that provide a lot of temptation for you, avoid that place.
The Wicked Witch of the West never had a beach house and probably didn't own any bathing suits, right? She stayed away from water, right?
Yeah.
Same sort of idea. Like you're not going to put yourself in a position to cause your own downfall.
Right. Don't. Yeah. Again, that's. Sometimes it's hard. I say sometimes it's hard. Like to avoid temptation sometimes because we are weak people. It's not an insult. It's just what we are. Sometimes we're weak people, and I'm saying we're sitting here in a nice class, comfortably talking about these things. It's much harder once you leave this place. But avoid temptations. Well, that's one way you can resist the devil. Approach God, and He'll approach you. Pretty practical. How can we approach God? Yeah.
This is so simplified.
Right.
And we talk about, we say this, I think sometimes we hear and go, so simple. But
Yeah.
It is praying to God.
Praying.
There are things that I have to pray to God about that, and we can talk about temptations and things like that. God, the problem, he says, resist the devil and he'll flee from you. You can pray to God to say, help me overcome this thing.
Yeah.
That's fighting. That's fighting. Help me fight.
Right.
Fight the devil on this thing. God, get on my side. Help me fight against the devil. No, just God, I need you to take this thing away from me.
Right.
Take this temptation away from me.
Mm-hmm.
Remove it. And believe that He's going to do it. And then live like He did.
Yeah.
That's how I do it every single day.
Right. Yeah.
And all of that is active. All
what I'm trying to get at as well. Is like I can pray for things like approaching God. I think you can do that by reading Scripture, finding out what He wants from you, finding out how you should be living your life, and spending time in prayer with God. Pray for what you need, pray for what you want, but then once you pray, once you request something from God, then go actively start doing that thing too. Yeah. 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 Right. And those pep talks can become prayers as well. You can talk to yourself and then talk to God as well at the same time. Washing your hands and purifying your hearts. Again, that's getting rid of temptation. That's watching your speech. That's watching what you see. That's watching who you interact with. It's things that are simple because we're sitting here in this room talking about it. But once you go out, it's a little harder. Okay? But this is how this is one way we get rid of that dissonance, that incongruent feeling of, I don't know, take daily and do not discontinue use. Keep going. Okay? We have less time than I thought. Getting rid of doubts, okay? Boy, we could spend a whole class on this. When doubts creep in, we have to realize that congruity and harmony don't depend on our feelings, okay? And this is kind of the wrap-up, the stick that I want to end on here. God is greater than our feelings, okay? God is greater than our thoughts and our feelings. Okay, I'm going to read that really quick. Ephesians chapter 1, verses 7 through 10. I'll read that really quick, again, from my version here. He's so rich in kindness and grace that He purchased our freedom with the blood of His Son and forgave our sins. He has showered His kindness on us along with all wisdom and understanding. God has now revealed to us His mysterious will regarding Christ, which is to fulfill His own good plan. And this is the plan. At the right time, He will bring everything together on the earth, under the authority of Christ, everything in heaven and on earth. Through faith, we can have confidence in what God is doing in our lives, what He has planned for us, what we can expect and hope from Him. God works through us to accomplish His will and to accomplish what He wants, despite what we are and what we tell ourselves we are. I can get down on myself for not being the type of Christian that I'm supposed to be, like Paul describes in Romans chapter 7. I can go through those really intense emotions, but God works through me, loves me, and is willing to forgive me, despite what I know that I am, a sinner, and what I tell myself I am, which is sometimes often a bit more intense than what I actually am. Okay? Is this making sense? That's how we get rid of that incongruent feeling, that dissonance, that we're not who we're supposed to be. Any questions on this before I move to my conclusion here? Any questions, any comments? Fly through things. I hate doing that, but it's okay. Okay, let me move to my conclusion here. So just to conclude, to wrap things up, often we struggle with an earth self and a heaven self. Again, the heaven self is the version of ourselves that Christ sees, wants us to realize, wants us to understand who we are in reality once we have put on Christ in baptism, who we are. Okay, but do we often see that? No. We get bogged down in other things. Overcoming the earth self brings the unity and congruence that we want. Getting rid of either the sin in our life, the lazy faith, putting things aside from us that we don't want to have, that brings clarity. That brings a singular focus that is congruent, is harmonious. It brings that unity. But it takes constant work. It's daily. It's a daily struggle, and that struggle is a part of the process. Just because you struggle doesn't mean you're failing. It's a part of the process, but it is daily. Okay. Any final questions? Any final thoughts before we close out here? Any parting words? Okay. Cool. Very nice.